غير آباؤهم فهم غافلون. لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون. إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون. وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون. وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون. إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم. إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين. واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون. قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون. قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين. قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم. قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون. وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون. وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون. أتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغني عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون. إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين. إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون. قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين. وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون. يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون. ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون. وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون. وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون. وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملت أيديهم أفلا يشكرون. سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون. وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون. والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم. والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالأرجون القديم. لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون. وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثل ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين. وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين. وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لم يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين. ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين. ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخرسمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون. ونفخ في السور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون. قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون. فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون. إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون. سلام قولا من رب رحيم. سلام قولا من رب رحيم. سلام قولا من رب رحيم. وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أحد إليكم يا بني آدم أن لا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم. ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون. هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون. اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون. ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون. ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون. ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون. وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين. أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللنا لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون. واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون. فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون. أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين. وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم. الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون. أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم؟ بلى وهو الخلاق العليم. إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون. فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة مع الإخلاص والصلوات.
بر محمد وآل محمد صلوات. ہو گئے رخصت جہاں سے مومنوں مولا نکی. ہو گئے رخصت جہاں سے مومنوں مولا نکی. آج پھر سادات کے گھر ہے صف ماتم بچھی. ہو گئے رخصت جہاں سے مومنوں مولا نکی. کٹ گئی رو کے جوانی سامرا کی قید میں. یاد کر کر کے اسیری سید سجاد کی. ہو گئے رخصت جہاں سے مومنوں مولا نکی. سر میں خاک یتیمی کرتے ہیں ماتم حسن. زہر سے بابا کی زندہ میں شہادت ہو گئی. ہو گئے رخصت جہاں سے مومنوں مولا نکی. پی لیا جام شہادت اے میرے 10ویں امام. بخش دی اسلام کو یوں آپ نے زندگی. ہو گئے رخصت جہاں سے مومنوں مولا نکی. ہوں نکی کے قاتلوں پر ہر گھڑی اللہ کی لعنت. بن گئے مولا کے قاتل حشر تک ہے لعنتی. ہو گئے رخصت جہاں سے مومنوں مولا نکی. برساتی رہی، ہو گئے رخصت جہاں سے مومنوں مولا نکی بر محمد والے محمد صلوات۔
محمد وآل محمد صلوات۔ جب لوٹ کے کربلا سے اسیر ستم چلے، سجاد سر برہنا بادر دلم چلے، روتے سرو کو پیٹتے پابند غم چلے، زینب نے لاش شاہ سے کہاں بائی ہم چلے، مرنے سے آپ کے میں ایذائے اٹھاتی ہوں، دربار میں یزید کے سر ننگے جاتی ہوں، بھائی تمہاری دور سے مر جائے گی بہن، کیوں کر تمہاری لاش کو دفنائیں گی بہن، کاہے کو چھٹ کے قید سے اب آئے گی بہن، کس طرح آپ کو اب پائے گی بہن، ناچار قید ظلم میں یہ خواستتاً چلی، لو بائی شہر شام میں جانب بہن چلی، سونپا تجھے خدا کو اے زہرا کے گل عذار، اس تیری بے کسی کو بہن ہو گئی نثار، ہائے ہائے یہ ریت گرم ہے گلشن بدن فگار، یہ حل کے نازنی تیرا اور غیاب دار، گردن کٹا کے بائی بیاباں میں سو گئے، غافل بہن سے آن کے جنگل میں سو گئے۔ ہائے ہائے میرے مسافر کرب و بلا حسین، ہائے ہائے میرے غریب میرے میں لقا حسین، ہائے ہائے تجھے نہ پانی کا قطرہ ملا حسین، ہائے ہائے تمام تن تیرا ٹکڑے ہوا حسین، پیاسے گلے پہ خنجرے بیداد چل گیا، ہائے ہائے تڑپ تڑپ کے تیرا دم نکل گیا۔ انا للہ و انا الیہ راجعون۔ سورۃ البرکۃ الفاتحہ۔
لٹ گئے آل ابا، لٹ گئے آل ابا، آج 18 بنی فاطمہ کا خون بہا، لٹ گئے آل ابا، لٹ گئے آل ابا، نہر پر بازوئے سقائے حرم کاٹے ہوئے، دکھ برے نانا سہے، دکھ برے نانا سہے، بازوئے سیبت نبی شیدیلا ورنہ رہا، لٹ گئے آل ابا، لٹ گئے آل ابا، سر کھلے اونٹوں پہ سینانیاں سب ساتھ گئیں، راہیے شام ہوئی، راہیے شام ہوئی، کوئی پرسان و مددگار لٹ گئے آل ابا، لٹ گئے آل ابا، لاش اصغر کو لیے دیوری پیما، حال تبا، شاہ نے دی صدا، شاہ نے دی صدا، ننھے معصوم کی گردن پہ لگا تیر جفا، لٹ گئے آل ابا، لٹ گئے آل ابا، قتل شبیر ہوئے چن گئی زینب کی ردا، لٹ گئے آل ابا، لٹ گئے آل ابا، بر محمد وآل محمد صلوات۔
Sheikh Bilal, respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tonight's recitation of Surah Yasin was sponsored for the thought of the love of the marhumin displayed on the screen, Surah Al-Mubarak Al-Fatiha. This Sunday, January 5th, Madrasa will be back in session starting at 10:45 a.m. And lastly, let us please recite 5 times the ayah of Amma Yujib for all those who are struggling here and around the world. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibu al-mutarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su'. Amma yujibu al-mutarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su'. Amma yujibu al-mutarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su'. أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد صلوات على محمد وآل محمد.
رحم الله من يقرأ سورة الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. الحمد لله رب العالمين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين، واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولله أسماء الحسنى فادعوه بها وذروا الذين يلحدون في أسمائه سيجزون ما كانوا يعملون. آمنا بالله، صدق الله العلي العظيم. Your second salawat for love of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. And your loudest salawat is condolences to the master of our time, Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بذكر المصائب آل محمد. May Allah increase in our reward for commemorating the difficulties of the family of the Prophet. Tonight, marking the third night of the month of Rajab, is associated with the martyrdom of our 10th Imam, Ali ibn Muhammad Al-Hadi al-Naqi alayhi salam. One of the interesting points is that the second of Rajab is actually associated with his wiladat. In our community, we mark his wiladat on the 15th of Dhul Hijjah, but another date that it's ma'roof or is associated with him, and this is the second of Rajab, such that we would say that his life is begun on the second of Rajab, and his shahadat after a period of 42 years is on the third of Rajab. This imam is one of the miracles of imamat in that he begins his imamat at a very young age, of approximately 6 years of age, and his imamat lasts for a period of 34 years. We actually see the entire lifespan of the Imam in front of us in this time period, where he begins from 6, being the authority of Allah on this earth, 6 or 8 according to some narrations, and he proceeds to be the authority of Allah through his adolescence and through his maturity, through his having children, and even the death of his children takes place in his lifetime, with the death of his oldest son, Sayyid Muhammad, who was buried in Balad, and we've talked about him in the past. The verse that we're beginning our discussion with today, to give us context of why this conversation is important, comes from Surah A'raf, verse number 180. In it, Allah mentions, and He says, Lillahi asma'ul husna. Allah is the possessor of the beautiful names. Fad'uhu biha. So call upon Him by these names. وَذَرُوا الَّذِينَ يَلْحِدُونَ. And be careful of those who blaspheme or hide or avoid the names of Allah. فِي أَسْمَائِهِ. فَسَيُجْزَوْنَ مَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. And they will be compensated for the mistake and for the evil that they do. This verse, Allah mentions His names and says, call upon Allah and connect with Allah through His names. The names of Allah are in 3 categories. The first of them are those names like Allah that are from the tongue. We may not understand them, we may not know the depth of their meaning, we may not understand the detail behind them, but that Allah has instructed us and we call Him through these names on our tongue. The second category of Allah's names are those names like Ar-Rahman, Al-Ghafur, Ar-Rahim, Al-Basir. These names give us a description of Allah that we can intellectually approach Allah through the name and the description. And we can think about the name and its absolute presence in Allah. And we can think about Allah and we can think about His name and use that name to intellectually approach a proximity to Allah. The third name refers to those names of Allah that are associated with our heart and our understanding because we have lived through the experience of those names. Let me elaborate. When the ulama elaborates on this point, they say that in alim al-arwah, before we were created, we have experienced the mercy of Allah. We have experienced the khaliqiyyat of Allah. We have experienced certain attributes of Allah that brought us into existence. The resonance of that name that was presented to us through the action of Allah gives us an affiliation and a connection of the heart that, for example, no matter how much I want to be an atheist or refuse the presence of Allah, within my heart is something present because I have lived the reality of the one who is Khaliq, that I come into existence, that my heart cannot refuse it, no matter how much my tongue and my mind may say otherwise. These names of Allah bear a very deep connection with us because they have practical resonance in our life. Allah describes and says about these names, He says, call upon me through all of these names. And those who refuse to call upon me, yulhidun. A mulhid. In English we translate this term to someone who is a blasphemer. But really mulhid comes from the root of lahad, lahad referring to the grave that's made. And the intention of this word is the one who covers and hides and tries to run away from the attribute of Allah, or tries to run away from a concept is referred to as the mulhid, who wants to pretend like it doesn't exist and stay away from it entirely. And he refuses its presence and authority. Any concept a person can be a mulhid for. We see it today in contemporary environment that mulhideen exist, for example, in flat earthers. You can tell them, you can show them, you can present to them the reality of what the earth is and the reality of what it is to be a globe and the gravity and all the infrastructure and all of these points. You can show them the physical logic of it, but they become mulhid. They refuse to acknowledge and they deny their intellect and they turn away from this concept. Allah describes and He says that there are those names that I want you to call me through, and those who refuse to do this action are the ones who will be given their due recompense for their actions by Allah Himself. The idea that there are names of Allah that have a resonance with our hearts and we believe in the presence of that name and we believe that we have an interaction with that name to gain proximity to Allah is one of the necessities. Why? Because otherwise it's a completely foreign concept to us. Allah exists completely out of our realm of understanding. Which is why when we talk about what are these names of Allah that we have a connection of the heart with, one of the descriptions that the Mufassirin present, and they turn back to the hadith of Ahlul Bayt, is to say that we, the Ahlul Bayt, are these names of Allah that you are connected to. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The point of this statement is to describe and say that the attribute of Allah in its perfection and its manifestation in its perfection of mercy, of kindness, of goodness, of all of the different elements that Allah is known by, could be beyond the concept of humanity if there was some practical application by which it would be recognized. Which is why Allah gave us living examples amongst ourselves that are the perfection of what Allah desires and what Allah likes to see in His creation, so that we can acknowledge and appreciate the presence of the Creator. The same way that today, for example, we say recognize the Creator not by pondering over Him but by acknowledging His creation, Allah, in wanting His names to be known to us and for us to understand them, gave us the seerah and the example of Ahlul Bayt. Which is why when we want to see, for example, the attribute of Allah that He is Al-Hadi, He is the guide, He gave us an Imam who is known as Al-Hadi so that you could see the guidance of Allah in action. When we want to know Allah and approach Him, it is through the example of seeing how these Imams behaved and what they did and why they were given these alqab and these names specifically that connects us back to Allah, not to anyone else. So therefore, pondering over these titles that are given, when we take a look at our 10th Imam and we see that one of his most famous titles that he's known by is Al-Hadi, Al-Naqi, the pure one, we can understand and see the attributes of Allah by understanding how this Imam interacted with society. And this is why Allah describes and He says, call upon me through these names. Yani seek the wasila to Allah through the path of the Ahlul Bayt. And the one who refuses to submit to the path of the Ahlul Bayt, Allah is the one who will compensate them for this evil deed. It is not upon us to go out and to look for them or to compensate them in this process. This description that the approach to Allah is through these Ahlul Bayt, that their titles are the titles of the manifestation of the names of Allah, is an important concept for us to understand. And tonight, we'll mention a few of the ways of how our 10th Imam was the manifestation of this attribute of Allah, who is the guide. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Sallu ala Muhammad. I have to remember that clock doesn't work, so make sure if I go too long, somebody just fall over and I'll know. When we see the life of our 10th Imam being the guide, we see some of the aspects of how he presented the guidance of Allah and the path to Allah in a way that was impossible for any human being to do. And there are a variety of different narrations that give us this explanation. The time of the Imam is one of the most difficult periods of time in the history of Islam, where his imamat coincides with the advent of Mutawakkil. Mutawakkil, who is probably the worst of the khulafa, especially from amongst the Banu Abbas, if not ijma'an, from all of them. He's the one who twice goes through for the destruction of the grave of Imam Hussein. He's also the one who, for example, created the open murder of anyone who disagreed with him ideologically. You see, prior to the advent of Mutawakkil, amongst the general population of Muslimin, there was a split philosophically. And the focal point of this split was the discussion of the Qur'an. That was the Qur'an created, or is the Qur'an, for example, joined with the Spirit of Allah and eternal? And these two ideas were debated amongst the Muslimin in general. The Shia, because of the example of Ahlul Bayt, never got into this debate. We had Imam Sadiq, we had Imam Rada, we had all of the Imam explain to us that the Quran is the creation of Allah, there's nothing to discuss. But those who did not have the instruction of the Ahlul Bayt were confused by this issue. That the Quran is the speech of Allah, is it then therefore a part of Allah, and therefore Allah has existed forever, therefore the speech has existed forever. And these were known as the Asha'ira. And then there was another school of thought that was known as the Mu'tazila, who believed similar to the Shia in the sense that they believe that no, the Quran is a creation of Allah, and that it is something that Allah can bring into existence, and Allah's entity is completely separate from this. At the advent of the Khilafat of Mutawakkil, the Mu'tazila had become an authority and were the main general ideology in Islam and the philosophy of Islam amongst the general population. Mutawakkil, when he comes into his Khilafat, destroys this ideology and persecutes anyone and everyone who believes in this ideology, and brings back the backward thinking of the idea that the Quran is a part of Allah and that it is something eternal and exists with Allah. This ideology of not thinking about something and accepting something, and this ideology is what eventually gives root to some of the extremists that exist in the world today. The foundation of that extremism that exists in the world was almost squashed. And Mutawakkil is the one who brought it back. He was the one who laid the foundations of misguidance that we still suffer the consequences of today, where people who see us that if we don't agree with their philosophical ideology, we're not even seen as Muslim. This was the teaching of Mutawakkil, who persecuted anyone who disagreed with him. In that time is when we see the dawr of Imam Al-Hadi as the guide in bringing people back to the path of Islam and teaching people how it is to come to Islam. There's two stories we'll mention. In one, it's described that the persecution in the lands of Muslimin was not just of those who disagreed and were Muslim, but even the Jews and the Christians were persecuted by Mutawakkil, where he made it mandatory for them to wear a badge that would indicate that this was a Jew or a Christian living in Muslim lands. It happens that one of the Christians from the city of Baghdad is called to see Mutawakkil in the city of Samarra. And upon realizing this, he realizes that no one is called to Mutawakkil that lives to tell about it again. So he begins to ponder, what should he do? How should he proceed with this problem? What should happen to him? And he comes to the realization that he had met one pious person in his life who he believes that the prayer of that pious person may be something that's a protection. He says, when they took this Imam from Medina to Samarra, he stopped in the city of Baghdad. And I saw no one more pious in my life than this Imam who went to visit his forefathers that are buried in the city of Baghdad in Qadhmain. And he makes the decision, he says, if I have to go see the Khalifa, first I will go see this pious man to pray for me, and I will give some charity for him to disperse, and then I will go face this difficulty that's ahead of me. So sure enough, when he proceeds to the city of Samarra, he wants to find this pious person, but he's a Christian. He doesn't know anything. He doesn't know the name of the Imam. He doesn't know any which way of how to find this Imam. So he stands in the city of Samarra and realizes his confusion and begins to ponder, how am I going to find this person? I know he's here. I know he was brought here. Is he alive? Is he present? I don't know. As he begins to wander around the city and think what should he do before he presents himself in Dar al-Imara, in the palace of the Khalifa, he passes by a house where the man comes to him and he says, your name is so-and-so. He says, yes, my name is so-and-so. He says, come in. And he brings him in, and this man says, in front of me I found sitting Imam Al-Hadi alayhi salam. He says, this man said to me, you have an amana to give me. Give me the amana. And this Christian man presented him the sadaqah, and the Imam took it. He says, I know you are overwhelmed by what you are seeing here, but you being a Christian, you will not change your faith. But in your lineage and your children, they will come to the love of Ahlul Bayt. Eventually this man says, I left this place, and I went to the Khalifa, and I met with the Khalifa, and I exited from the Khalifa without any harm coming to me. And then the neighbors authenticate that some years later we found his son, and his son had become one of the staunch followers of the madhab Ahlul Bayt. That the hidayat of the Imam is what guided this man, protected him, and gave him security. In another story that comes from a personality by the name of Abdul Rahman, who was from the city of Isfahan. Today when we think of the lands of Iran and Persia, we think of those who love the Ahlul Bayt sincerely, but for much of the history of Islam, Iran was not a place that loved the Ahlul Bayt. As a matter of fact, many of the books that are written against the Ahlul Bayt by the different schools of thought were Iranians, Persians who wrote them. And during that time, this man by the name of Abdul Rahman says, I was from Isfahan, and he became a lover of Ahlul Bayt, to the extent where the people of Isfahan would come to him and say, how is that amongst us, who don't have any relationship with this thought ideology of who this Ahlul Bayt are and to be connected to them, you love them and you're attached to them in spite of the fact that you're a minority and you have no support here. Abdurrahman says, I witnessed something in my life that without it, there was no way for me to have come to this path, and now that I have experienced it, I can't walk away from this path. Said, Bashir Ba'ad, tell us, what did you experience? Abdurrahman tells his own story. And he says, when I was a young man, I was one who was known for very flagrant speech. I would speak against anyone. And I would speak against people in the city till eventually the people of the city gathered together and issued a verdict against me to be sent to the Khalifa of the time. And they took a caravan and they took me along with it, and they said, you will go to the Khalifa now and we will complain to the Khalifa about you and your speech and your harsh speech and your abusive language that you use against people. Abdurrahman says, in this I was taken in a kafla to the city of Samarra. When we came to the city of Samarra, the approach to go see the Khalifa was not that you can walk in and say, yes, thank you, I'd like to see the Khalifa. But rather these groups that would come and sit outside, and eventually they would be called in one after another, or whenever that time was allotted for them. And you would sit outside the Dar al-Imara in the place of the Khalifa for as long as it took. A day, 2 days, sometimes less, sometimes more. But you would witness everyone going in to the Dar al-Imara. He says, when we were sitting out there waiting for our turn, the news was given to us that one of the sons of Zahra who lives in the city needs to be brought before the Khalifa, and that he attains a special status amongst the people where they honor and they respect him. He says, what I witnessed was, as the time came for this man to go in, and we had been waiting, but he took precedence over us and came from behind, I saw all of the people line up in columns out of respect for him. And I saw all of the people change their mannerism and change their akhlaq to, instead of fighting amongst each other, to silence and watching and observing. So he says, I came into line to see who is this that could have such an impact that all of these people would change their behavior. He says, as I stood there, I saw a man begin to proceed between us whose piety, humility, and abudiyat of Allah was something that made him attractive to me. I immediately fell in love with this man. I immediately cared about this man. And realizing who he was going in front of, in my heart I started to pray for him. And I started to pray, this mutawakkil mal'oon, whoever goes to see him, he kills. But this man who is going in front of him, oh Allah, protect him. Oh Allah, save him. Let no harm come to him. Simply by looking at Imam Al-Hadi, this was his reaction. He says, as I was standing there whispering my prayer between me and Allah, this man, when he approached me, he turned and he looked at me and made eye contact. And he said to me, Allah has accepted your prayer. And for your prayer, He has extended your life. He has granted you a great wealth. And He has granted you many sons that will be given to you. And then he proceeded into Dar al-Imara. After that, I don't know what happened to him, but I can tell you that that comment that he made me when I returned to Isfahan safely, my wealth exploded to the extent where I would make 1 million dirhams in one day. 1 million dirhams. He says, and I had 10 sons, and my life was extended. He says, that one interaction made me believe in his authority and that there was no one other than the authority of Allah who could have known what was in my heart. The hidayah of Imam Al-Hadi and the hidayah that Imam Al-Hadi gives this person is complete. Why? Look at the prayer that this man made. Oh Allah, save this Imam, save this person from being killed. The process of being killed is what? Is that your life is cut short. The Imam, in exchange for this dua, extended his life. The reaction of being killed is what? Your wealth is usurped and taken away from you. For the dua that the man made, Imam gave him complete wealth and ultimate wealth. From the process of being killed, your progeny and your lineage is destroyed, that there is nothing that comes from you. Imam gave him a complete progeny from that moment. Meaning the hidayah of the Imam was not simply the concept of acknowledging that you made a dua for me and you care for me, but rather that the hidayah the Imam gave was that whatever was in your heart, Allah has given you better in every element and field associated with that dua. And he says, when this experience I went through, there was no contest for me except to believe in the authority of Allah, and that there can be no other authority of Allah than one who knows my hidden affairs and guides me to what is best and better in this life and the hereafter. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We'll mention one more. One of the companions of Ahlul Bayt found himself in a difficulty, and he found that Imam Al-Hadi had exited from the city of Samarra, so there was some opportunity to see him. So this man came to Imam Al-Hadi and presented his difficulty. He said, Ya Ibn Rasulullah, I am in debt for about 10,000 dinar, which is a great amount. Ya Ibn Rasulullah, is there any way that you can help me? The Imam replies to him and he says, I can help you, but you have to follow my command exactly. If you don't follow my command exactly, there is destruction for you. There is no good for you. The man says, Ya Ibn Rasulullah, whatever you command me, I will listen to. Whatever you tell me to do, I will do. Imam says, I'm going to write you a letter. And in this letter, I will write that I owe you 30,000 dinar. I want you to take this letter and tomorrow come to Samarra and come to Fulan bin Fulan place where I'll be sitting with many other people. And I want you to present this note and ask to be paid, but not with respect. I want you to be rude. That why has it been so long you have not paid me? Why do you refuse to give me my right? And approach me with harshness in that discussion. Now imagine that the Imam commands you to talk to me in a harsh and rude manner. This man himself, his tariq is that he was one of the Shia Amir al-Mu'mineen, lived by the city of Kufa, and he was one of the followers of Imam Ali from that time when Imam Ali was in the city of Kufa, and his lineage was pure in the love of Ahlul Bayt from that time. And he hears the command of the Imam, and the Imam tells him, I want you to be harsh and rude with me in front of everyone and speak to me in a harsh language. And Imam insists, you will have to talk to me in this way. Do you agree with what I'm instructing you to do? And the man says, I believe whatever you tell me to, Ya Ibn Rasulullah, I will do as you say. So sure enough, he takes this letter from the Imam, and the next day he comes into this majlis and this gathering, and he sees the Imam there, and he stands before the Imam waving the paper and saying, why don't you pay me what you owe me? I have been waiting for so long. Why do you refuse to give me my haqq? It is wrong for you to do this to me. It so happens that in this majlis, the spies of the Khalifa were sitting as well too. And the spies of the Khalifa gathered this information that Imam Al-Hadi had a debt due to so-and-so, and Mutawakkil actually sent the amount of 30,000 dinar to Imam Al-Hadi. Imam Al-Hadi goes afterwards and gives this wealth to this man, and he says, take this wealth, fulfill your loans with it, and use the rest to serve your family. And the man replies, Ibn Rasulullah, I can do all of that with just 1/3 of this. The Imam says, no, but when we give you completely what you need. So go and grow your family and take care of them, and make sure that their affairs are settled with this. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. These examples are the idea of turning to the Imam and turning to Allah through the Imam. That the authority of the Imam is what Allah grants him. And that these are the names of Allah by which we can connect and have that deep relationship and understanding of the attribute of Allah. That Allah is the one who guides. And through His Imam He gives us guidance. And to follow that example and to implement that example in our life, we come and we attach ourselves to the Ahlul Bayt. And we use them as a wasila to get closer to Allah. The same way a name is a wasila to know a person. To know someone is to call them by their name. To recognize someone is to mention their name. The Ahlul Bayt are those names of Allah by which the absolute perfect attributes of Allah can be understood, of how they can exist. And without them, it may not be that we can have that connection of our heart with Allah. That's why the attributes of Ahlul Bayt and their teaching and their guiding, and through these alqab that Allah has designated for them and raised them by these titles, is a way by which we reach back to Allah and we connect with Allah through His names. That Allah is the one who instructs us, call me from my names. And these are the most beautiful names of Allah that we can call Him by, is by asking through the wasila of these Ahlul Bayt. When we look at the life of this Imam, one of the questions that many of the ulama, many of the mu'arrikheen, many of the people have written, that why would he be called Al-Hadi? Ma huwa takhsis? What is his speciality? The same way with every Imam, their title bears a speciality. Every Imam went through a difficult period where they guided the people. Every Imam was Hadi. But that this Imam is specifically known as Hadi. Why? There are many opinions about this. But one discussion is to describe and say that he was the one who guided through a life of difficulty. That in spite of the challenges and the hardships he faced, he was the one who constantly at every step of the way was the guide for humanity. When you look at the life of this Imam, it is a period of only 42 years. Only 42 years. His Imamat is a period of 34 years, which is a very long Imamat, but look what he experiences, that his Imamat, when it begins at such a young age, that he is separated from his father. But that separation from his father is not something that disturbs him and prevents his guidance. Look and see that his time in the city of Medina is cut short at the period of maybe 21 years where he is forced disrespectfully to leave the city of Rasulullah, such that he is never entitled to return. Yet that interaction, that hardship never prevents him from being a guide, and even those who took him away were those that guided him, or were guided by him. That the period of 21 years that he is in the city of Samarra, they killed his son out of hatred for him. They imprisoned him. They kept his followers away from him. They did not let him speak openly. They disrespected him in the court. Yet you can't look at any interaction of this Imam as being one of bitterness. You can't look at any interaction of this Imam except that hidayah is brought forth from his example. The love of Allah is shown in his example. That we would say and present the argument to say that if there is an example of hidayah, that hidayah is in spite of every travesty and difficulty that we face in life. That no matter what it is that you go through life and whatever it is that happens to you, never step away from the process of being the one who follows hidayah and provides hidayah. The Imam is an example that in spite of difficulty, enact the teachings of guidance, and if you have something pure, ensure that its effect is left in society. That today we the Shia are not only those who should seek the concept of hidayah from the Imam, but we should also be the ones who embody the hidayah in spite of the hardships, in spite of the difficulties, in spite of the challenges, such that the same way the Imam was a guide for those who believed in him and those who didn't believe in him. Are we a guide for humanity? Or are we so overcome by our challenges that we think of nothing but ourselves? Yeah, this is that Mazloom Imam who is killed alone in Samarra with only his son with him. The description writes and says that when he is poisoned by Mu'taz, that the poison in his body took a deep effect, and they wanted then to hide the fact of his Shahada, that no one should know. That the only one who was with him was his son Imam al-Askari. They describe and say that Imam al-Askari, sitting by his father, would tear at his collar at the difficulty of seeing his father in this condition. He would see the poison in his body affecting him, and we would see that eventually the poison became so strong that his eyes began to close, his breath became shallow, his hands began to move from the pain of the poison in his body, until eventually the soul of Imam Al-Hadi left his body. Imam Al-Askari wept and cried and tore at his collar at the loss of his father. The janazah of Imam Al-Hadi was prepared. They describe and say that the janazah of Imam Al-Hadi, after Imam Al-Askari prayed upon him, was taken out into the city of Samarra. So many millions of people and thousands of people gathered around this janazah that the Khalifa became worried that there will be an uprising, that he will lose his power and authority. He insisted and said, take the body of Al-Hadi and return it to his house. Bury him in his house. Do not let his grave become a public place. Today when you go visit the A'immah alayhimus salam, there are only two Imams whose house you go to. One is Imam Al-Hadi and the other is his son Imam Hassan Al-Askari, who are buried in that same house. I imagine for you how difficult it is that a son should visit his father and grandfather. I would imagine that Imam Zaman visits his father and his grandfather. Did you ever wonder what happened to the heart of Imam Zaman when they put bombs next to the grave of his father? Did you ever wonder what happened to the heart of my Imam when they disrespected his father and he stood in patience waiting and watching? And he was not permitted by the command of Allah to even stand up for his father in his own house. Then he was prevented from supporting his own father. Oh, the Messiah of Imam Zaman. That he is the one who is the Hadi of our time. But he was not able to protect the Hadi that Allah had given to us in this world. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره Oh Allah, give us the tawfiq of the wasila of this Imam. Ya Allah, bihaqqi Fatima wa abiha wa ba'liha wa baniha wa sirr al-mustawdi'a fiha. Ya Allah, by the right of Imam Al-Hadi, guide us on the path of Islam. Ya Allah, by the right of this month of Rajab, by the right of the Ahlul Bayt in this month, forgive our sins and cover our flaws. Ya Allah, by the right of the Quran and by the right of those who have taught us the Quran, oh Allah, keep us on the upright path and the teachings of the Quran. Ya Allah, keep our children on the upright path of Islam. Ya Allah, by the right of our 10th Imam, fulfill our hajat. Ya Allah, those amongst their families, their communities that are suffering through sickness and disease, give shifa and aman to the mu'mineen wherever they are. Ya Allah, hasten the appearance of Sahib al-Zaman. Make us and our families from the upright supporters of Sahib al-Zaman. وانصر الفاتحة لأرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات مع الصلوات. صلى محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فاطمة حسين.
عزیزوں کیا غضب آیا نکی جگ سے اٹھا افسوس شہنشاہ دو عالم وہ اٹھا جگ سے ہزار افسوس عزیزوں کیا غضب آیا نکی جگ سے اٹھا افسوس نبی مرکد میں روتے ہیں علی جنت سے آئے ہیں کھلے سر فاطمہ پوتے کو رونے یہاں پہ آئی ہے عزیزوں کیا غضب آیا نکی جگ سے اٹھا افسوس کرو ماتم سبھی مل کے قیامت ہوئی عزادارو دیا ظالموں نے ہے زیر شیکوئے عزادارو عزیزوں کیا غضب آیا نکی جگ سے اٹھا افسوس یوں رو رو عسکری لاشیں پدر پہ کہتے ہیں ہر بار ہوا بن باپ کا افسوس کروں کیا میں جگر افغان عزیزوں کیا غضب آیا نکی جگ سے اٹھا افسوس میرا بابا یہ کیسی نیند میں سوئے میں روتا ہوں کرایا پر تسلیوں کے دے دی جو عزیزوں کیا غضب آیا نکی جگ سے اٹھا افسوس پٹک کر روتی ہے دختر امام دی کہ اے لوگو دو پرسا باپ کا ان کو قیامت ہوئی عزادارو عزیز चीजों क्या गजब आया न की जग से उठा ज़ियारत السلام عليك يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين السلام عليك يا ابن سيد الوصيين السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين خصوصا سيدي ومولاي أبا الفضل العباس وأختك زينب وبنتك سكينة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام عليك يا مولاي يا غريب الغرباء السلطان أبا الحسن مولانا علي بن موسى الرضا كن شفيعنا وشفيع والدينا في يوم الجزاء وفقنا الله زيارتك يا مولاي ورزقنا الله شفاعتك في الدنيا والآخرة السلام عليك وعلى أختك فاطمة المعصومة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب الزمان سيدي الأمان 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 السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن السلام عليك يا إمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان ورحمة الله وبركاته برمحمد وآل محمد صلوات
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم قل لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى أبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرزقك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Thank you.